as we give ourselves a lot of pleasure from activities, and AI is definitely dopamine and served in large doses, the seesaw becomes pain. And more we seek that, we seesaw towards pain. So I guess all of these conclaves are so well packed and well attended with so many luminaries here in the stage, in the room, is because possibly we all share a pain of how are we going to get this done? Because we are it when it comes to our organizations. We are the leadership, the buck stops with us. And therefore, I guess today's panel will dwell on it. We've agreed to make it very conversational. Hopefully, we engage you, and we are competing with Instagram and whatnot. So we'll be very aware of that. It's an evening. I thought jokes are good. So please pardon my bad humor. And we'll start this way, and then we'll engage in a conversation. And we've been asked to keep it a little shorter, so it's going to be a little quicker. So I'll start with Shalini, who's right next here. Shalini represents KPMG. So my question is around, let me just find it here, and we are all ready. So Shalini, please tell us, you play a very important part when you see things right from across a diverse spectrum of industries, consulting and whatnot. So what do you think are the major forces reshaping the target operating model in across the GCC landscape?
Thanks for that, Giri. A lot has been spoken about it, but I love an open-ended question like that. Like I was saying in the break to someone, when a GCC event, of course, gets kicked off by our GCC veteran, Lalit, followed by Shailaja, who represents a very different service provider industry, it speaks volumes for where the operating model is headed and the convergence that one is seeing. But if I was to just briefly touch upon the core tenets of how an operating model gets defined, we'll talk about 5 or 6 elements. At the core are always business processes, which are increasingly seeing a level of intelligence getting embedded like never before. You talk about people and how the human workforce is going to work alongside, competing, collaborating, replacing, working with the digital workforce is yet another tenet, and we know where that is headed. If you look at the operating model, working with the ecosystem, the constant influx, outflux that we see on the insourcing and outsourcing side is going to see that model evolve like, I don't know what the future holds. Every week we hear of something new, novel, and interesting happening in that space. If you look about organization structures, one could argue, and we'll hear about it, we get questioned, will GCC as a term exist? Seamless borders, org structures will have to be rewired, undone and redone. Governance, you'll have to make sure you empower to enable delivery. So if you look at all of these elements, and underpinning it all is technology, which is at the core of the operating model, truly it's increasingly crystal ball gazing. Where is that technology headed? We don't know. But I think the key to succeed in this is going to be how quickly can you rewire, restack, and repurpose your GCC. And that's what the future of operating models will tell us.
Great. So what you're hearing here is literally a challenge, right? How ready are we to be agile? So let me ask my other panelists, Kaustubh, this one's for you. You represent a really niche area, productization, engineering market. What's your big aha moment today? I mean, I'm sure we get surprised every day, but what's that big aha which is kind of keeping you awake?
So thanks for that, Giri. So I'll just give a 30-second context to our organization. Globally, we are a young organization, 4 years, as a joint venture backed by SAP. The India Center is also 4 years old. So the day the global organization got set up, the India Center came into picture. Where we are right now, more than 25% of our product portfolio is run and led out of India, including P&L ownership. Every 2 out of 3 co-innovations in our banking and finance space, are led, originated from India, or completely executed from India. For our insurance business, the entire innovation and AI practice is led from India globally. And then from our consulting side of the business, we have a significant presence in at least 80% of our customers, to a large extent providing solutions, so solutions architecting, implementing the products and so on. It wasn't an easy journey to get to this, and while there are multiple operating models that we all know about, right? there are really 2-3 tenets of, what allowed us to get to where we are. One, beyond just creating the mind space and, trying to look at the mindset of people, the first thing was about timing, right? We all know operating models exist, but the timing of pivot is really what I believe defines whether you're going to be successful or not. In cultures which are, European to a large extent, so German, French, it matters even more that you are able to time it well. So we timed our pivot for the GCC when our board, about 18 months back, said that we need to increase our revenues by 3x in 5 years. And we said that can be, a radically, game-changing point for us. Because all the while we were talking about execution, delivery, everyone was looking at it, compounded by the fact that, 3 business lines, 6 business heads, none of them had ever worked with India before. So completely new to the India ecosystem. So along with this timing, we did 2 things. One, we completely changed the conversations that our middle management and senior leadership started having with our stakeholders. Storytelling, conversations around business. On product, we started talking about time to market, revenues, new products, rather than talking about fulfilling product roadmaps. On our consulting business, we started talking about experience, solutioning, and also bringing in a revenue aspect there, because as consultants, you are working very closely to the customer. So conversations changed at the right time, and that started building a lot of capabilities, showcasing those capabilities. Second, we started looking around saying, if we really want to create a value towards this growth trajectory, we realized that a lot of our large customers, because we're core banking platforms, etc., have their GCCs in India. A lot of our channel partners have their India centers, and all of them are on the same trajectory as us, trying to prove value, trying to go up the value chain. And we said, can we not partner and create a very different ecosystem which will start allowing us to drive growth for our organization? So an ecosystem that got leveraged very, very differently suddenly, made the India setup sort of a hub for customers. So customers coming to visit their GCCs, we now suddenly become a very integral part where now we can showcase the pioneer story. We're no longer talking the India story, we're showcasing the pioneer story. So these 2-3 moments together sort of brought it in.
Yeah, hold that thought, and very interesting. So timing and ecosystem, and then we'll talk a little bit about GTM maybe in a while. Question for you, Amit. We share a common industry from our past, but I believe you're a futurist. I know for sure the kind of stuff you have done to bring underwriting to India. What's the new insurance operating model playbook looking like? What are you working on? Let us in on a bit of secrets. You're not that kind of a guy who will not tell us. Please tell us.
Thanks, Giri, for your kind words. Flashy word indeed. So to me, I think there are 3 key topics. Whether we talk about the operating model of today or the future, because eventually it's the maturity, how we're going to develop it further. First is the integral part, right? I think there has to be a one team, right? So while, of course, we are using GCC as a terminology today, but I think internally within Swiss Re, it's Swiss Re India. There's no distinction, the setup that we have here or the headquarter or Singapore or New York. So how integral the setup is, it should not be a shared service, business center, GCC. It should be just your another global location, which happens to be significant, which can drive the transformation of the organization. I think this is like the most critical part, which is a make or break situation. Secondly, I would say the setup, I'll still use the word GCC just so that make it easier for everyone. The second part is, it has to be the enterprise setup. So I know there are a lot of conversations which come around micro GCCs, that nano GCCs focusing on only one area. It's a great start, but if you really want this location to be sustainable for the future, it has to be the enterprise location. And when I say enterprise location, we are talking about the entire value chain of your business, which should be sitting here. So for example, you talked about from an insurance perspective, we will have from origination to underwriting, to actuarial, valuation, claims, booking, risk management. So basically the entire value chain around operations, business, data, technology should be sitting here. only then you can really unlock the synergies, the business impact. Otherwise, you're very much focused on your respective silos. And I think a lot of senior leaders, they actually look at these locations that we should not repeat the mistake of a global enterprise, because global enterprise is very siloed. I mean, but how do we really build the bridges, break the silos, look at things from an end-to-end perspective, create an impact? That is what the setup will, the value proposition will be defined through that. The third piece, which I would talk about, is the accountability. So basically what has happened historically in the entire GCC evolution is that all the roles which get moved to locations like India or Eastern Europe, I mean, it's like a split of low to mid complex activities. Let's bundle it together, let's move it. So India has become really strong when it comes to execution, and nothing wrong with it. Execution is critical for any group success. The point is, how do you bring execution, ownership, and leadership together, right? And when I say accountability, it has to come with like leadership, global leadership roles, seat at the table so that you can influence the business agenda. Only then you are really creating an impact, and it takes time. So that's why, to me, I mean, these three are the critical topics: integral, enterprise, and accountability.
Yeah, but I think really what hits home is the execution point. I don't think a lot of people see the level of execution muscle has been built in India, and I want to resonate with Lalit's point that GCCs are at scale for the investments which have been done in the last couple of decades. So fantastic. Thank you again. Shivu, and may I call you Shivu? I guess that's how you want to be called. So again, very, very different GCC with Semicon and so much of stuff happening in your world, but we'll get to that. What is it that one thing you want to champion now that GCCs have a seat at the table, voice in the room? What's that one thing you want to champion for the Semicon kind of infrastructure GCC?
Sure. I think many of you might not be aware of the whole model of semiconductor companies in India, but in the last 1 year, every day you hear about multiple different things. So let me put some context to it. First of all, a lot of people ask, why don't we manufacture chips in India? The minimum investment required is $15 to $20 billion, and that's just the first step. So you need another 15, 20 in next 5 to 6 years. So it's not an easy thing to set up a fab. But Tatas are the first company in India who's setting up the fab right now, which is a fantastic thing for India. There are around 8 or 9 OSATs which has been announced. OSATs is basically an outsourced packaging company. So after the chip is manufactured, somebody needs to package it together. So most of the OSATs also is, in the newspaper is termed as manufacturing, but actually they're packaging companies. And the investments required for this is around $1 billion to $3 billion. That fits in very nicely with the India economy. And you will see more OSATs coming up in India across all the different cities. And what is interesting is most of this has come up in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. To design one chip, it takes around $30 million. Room for error is 0 because you make one bug, the chip is out. To actually get it to production, you're talking about $80 million. That's the design cost you have in the chip. So whenever you do a chip design center in India, we come in with that baggage. So you need to be 100% sure that your execution cannot go wrong. And it's only about execution and nothing else. And usually the team size is to design an entire chip, you need 60 to 70 people, that's it. And we were one of the fortunate ones. If you look at TI came to India in 1980s. Synopsys yesterday celebrated 30 years of presence in India. Right? We were the ones who have seen the journey which Lalit, I've met him, he doesn't remember in his LG days. When we were called as a multinational companies, we became ODC or an offshore design center, then we were called GICs, Global Innovation Center, then we became Global Competency Center, and then we became Global Capability Center now, and as you said, we might become something else. But in all these steps, I think what changed was execution was always there, cost was always there, but I think the leadership role, as you rightly said, the accountability has actually increased a lot. In our company right now, Astro Labs, we have 4 product lines, and for a company like ours, which is doing $700 to $800 million of revenue, went IPO last year, is valued at almost $40 billion right now. So you can imagine why somebody is betting on a company like us because of the execution, because of the products we are releasing. And I'm very proud to say that when we started Astro Labs in India, we picked up the flagship product in India. And this is a product which has not been taped out anywhere in the world. This entire team, which we have set up in India, is the one which is doing it. Why did the company like Astra, decide on doing this entire thing? Is because if you really look at the market, 20+% of designers across the world are Indians, right? And majority of them are in India right now. So, and many Indians in the global centers, right? So we have already earned our stars. It's very natural for us to completely pivot the model. And not just our company, the last 5-6 companies which has come up in the last 2 years pretty much are doing end-to-end right now in the product cycle. So I think that's the biggest shift we have seen, and it has come naturally, and it was earned in the last 30 years. So it didn't happen overnight. We can come out with all kinds of frameworks around it, but actually it is pure execution. And I think that's what has changed in our industry right now.
Good. And I think you kind of led into the next question is time horizon. I think it's taken 30 years for us to set it up. So I'm going to jump to Kaustubh, given you're short on time. What would be some of the go-to-market strategies you think, given the engineering product push that you're having from India, can we impact go-to-market strategies? What is your take?
So I'll probably, bring two lenses. The go-to-market strategy is heavily dependent on, one, are you operating in the space that the customers are in? And second, how deep is your expertise where if you go in front of the customers, you have the credibility with them? Now, to a large extent, what happens is a lot of our organizations, we have expertise on technology. We have expertise, let's say, functional, but we're not able to convert that expertise into a business expertise where you can go in front of the customers. In our case, while we are not so much into the India market, we have a go-to-market team that we have built over the last 2 years, which has this expertise to do it for global markets, especially Europe and Asia Pacific. Now, go-to-market has another connotation, right? As a GCC, to a large extent, if you're trying to create a lot more impact, you also need to start figuring out, saying your market to some extent are also your global stakeholders. And how do you prove to them that, the future state could be very different and the operating model works? And that is where we have a unique advantage where we can bring the best of worlds, to our global stakeholders. Today, a simple example that we have tried in the past is productization and as a service model, right? You can sit down and say, I have back office operations, I'm doing technology, I'm going to have the same models that apply. But if you want to move into an outcome-based model, you need to work backwards and ensure that, you're enabling that. So can you productize cybersecurity services? Can you productize KYC? Can you productize things that can be measured in units? Once you productize it, how do you then commercialize it? If you're measuring outcomes, can you start pricing from an outcome perspective, which makes you compete with non-traditional competitors, which is the services partners, right? And that suddenly changes the relevance of what you're trying to do, and it frees up a lot of, questions on empowerment, accountability, and so on that start shifting. So that, are some very strong potential ways to get to it.
Interesting. So product companies competing with service. So I'll jump back to you, Amit. I know we're not supposed to talk so much of numbers because we are all at whatever level we are operating, but what's that one KPI which will really prove that our operating model is changing things? When you think of insurance, there's so many of it. Is there anything which comes to your mind? Here is that one metric that you think will move things for you. What's it that you would like to improve with changes in operating models?
Yeah. So I think a lot of time the discussion is about the KPIs, etc., right? I personally believe there is only one organizational KPI. There's no distinction between GCC and the group. So whatever the business priorities are, whatever the financial outcomes are, whether it's a top line, bottom line, mitigation of risk, or even managing the cost, I think all these KPIs are the group-wide KPIs. We should really look at it. I think the important point here is that the GCCs are still in the journey. They haven't really evolved to the HQ strata in terms of the knowledge, expertise across the spectrum. Few capabilities, yes, but not across the spectrum. There, I think it is very important to have an aspiration that if you have this capability from now to next 3 to 5 years, firstly, what is your ambition? How are you going to take it up? So for example, if I pick business capabilities, because I think tech, it's common across. So we picked like two of the capabilities, actuarial and natural catastrophic modeling.
Wow.
Just to give you an example, because yeah, people will say, oh, does India have that talent, expertise?
Climate change maybe. Yes.
Climate change, yeah. So if I say actuarial, today in India, Swiss Re has the largest actuarial talent base. We have 400 actuarial colleagues. Now, if I take the Swiss Re frame, 50% of our life and health valuation actuaries are based out of India, right? And then the point now is that while, of course, I've got the penetration in, but how do I also ensure the contribution and impact is also at 50%? Or even beyond that, right? Now that's the progression journey, which is the deepening of the capability, accountability, and the impact. If I talk about natural catastrophe risk, right? So we keep on talking about earthquake, floods. The question is, how do you really measure? How do you model? Of course, there are softwares, but what are the assumptions in the software? So we have our own model development team. For entire Asia Pacific, you're talking about Japan, Australia, Singapore, the entire NatCat modeling happens out of India, including the global leader who's based out of here. 90% of our costing on the NatCat for Swiss Re Group happens from here. So I'm just sharing you some of those high-level examples, just to show it's more illustrative to also then say, okay, what is my aspiration, where am I today, and how I'm going to go there. So that could be a measure of success, more from, I would say, GCC lens standpoint, which can actually help in the journey.
So if I kind of stitch this together, the way you say it, having all the enterprise capabilities, I think that's what Kaustubh was saying, and what Chivu was also indicating is deepening in the GCC is going to be a sure shot way to make it more valuable. I think that's what I'm taking away. So Shalini, with you for helping us understand. I know I love the consulting word, worked with everybody. But if you take for a minute a consultant's hat, and especially you work a lot with the government, and we again heard that GCCs today are taking the front row when it comes to adding to the national economy. What would you really like to see? What's the change that these model changes, the deepening of expertise? Just give me a consultant lens on it, if that's okay.
So, at the beginning, I think Lalit gave a good summary of what are some of those top trends. The government is working on enabling the model going forward, and we're working with them. In the consulting world, and maybe my chance to do a little bit of a pitch, but
Please do.
But honestly, if you look at the future of GCCs, we speak a lot about alignment to HQ. It's not funny how much lack of alignment there is across many GCCs. There is still a huge need to help a global enterprise truly come together, synergize, and take advantage of the operating model it wants to define for itself. So how do we enable that ecosystem, allowing that to happen, setting up GCCs in the right way to truly unlock that value is one dimension. We speak about technology, a lot has been spoken about tech adoption, but we've also seen the perils of adoption, when you look at if that's not done right. So how do we make sure as an industry that those guardrails get defined in the right way? In this whole FOMO and rush to embrace AI, let's not repeat what we did through, say, the RPA boom.
Bitcoin, maybe.
Bitcoin, the RPA boom that
Blockchain.
happened 5 years ago. Let's not rush into something, but do it in a more deliberate manner. And I think providing those guardrails, making sure this happens in a meaningful manner, making sure we stay on the top of the purpose of what we're trying to drive here. Currently, there's chaos in the market with all the headwinds around the US tariff regime. But when you think about it, the more indispensable you become to the global model, the more future-proofed you are. So how do we make sure we look at elements of model, guardrails around technology, work with the government to put the right enablers in place, the right ecosystem coming together to sustain the advantage. We have not touched upon talent as much in this piece, but that's the big driver. How do we create a truly scalable, sustainable model. And all of that needs to come together for this operating model to continue to work and deliver, Giri.
Perfect. Time's up. That's what the screen says. I hope you found this interesting. Thank you for listening to us patiently. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, moderator Giri.